What up? WINBUSH here, and today I'm excited to show you guys how we're going to create the Mars environment using Unreal Engine. Now, this tutorial is geared towards the students that are part of the UCLA SMASH program, but I figured I'll put this up on my channel in case anybody else wanted this information. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So to start off, we're going to need to get Unreal Engine, and the way to do that is we need to come up to unrealengine.com, and then it will bring you to this website here. Now, Unreal Engine is a game engine at heart, but now it can be used for things like virtual production, broadcast, ArchViz, a whole bunch of different things. So when you come to the site, you'll actually see some tabs down here. And if you're like interested in anything in particular, just click on one of these tabs and it will show you like a use case study of how Unreal is used in like these different scenarios here. But to get started for us, we're going to want to sign in here. And if you don't have an account already, we have a couple of different options here. So if you wanted to just start from scratch and make like an Epic account, you could do that here, or you could sign in with like Facebook, Google. I like using Xbox Live because if you do play games, you could do some stuff that are like cross-platform, like Fortnite. If you wanted to play like against PC or PlayStation, you would log in and kind of hook up your Epic account with your game account. So I like logging in with my Xbox account here. So I just click on this and my information is already saved in here. So once it's verified, it's going to get me logged in like so. And so the next step from here is I want to come up to the download tab, and which is going to give us a few options. Now with Unreal Engine, recently they announced that if you use this platform with anything like broadcast or virtual production, you could use it 100% free. I guess they're making so much money off of Fortnite that they could kind of do that type of thing. But if you want to make like an interactive experience like a video game, you don't owe them any type of money unless your game makes $1 million in revenue, which at that point you owe them like 5%. And so I'm just going to select the creator's license here where it says 100% free. You select that, then you just install it and you'll be good to go. And then the next step from here is we want to go to a website called Quixel.com. So what Quixel does is they kind of specialize in making photogrammetry objects, which is basically stuff that looks photoreal. So say that you have like a statue, they'll take thousands of photos of that statue, and then they'll stitch it all together in 3D. And what you have in the end is like a photogrammetry statue that looks real when you look at it. So if I come down to megascans right here, we can kind of browse through some of the assets that they made here. So I'm going to click browse megascans. And what we have here, if you watch their tutorial, like you'll click right here, it says go to video, and it shows you how they made this scene. And these are all the different assets that they use to make this scene, which is kind of crazy because you think about it, like to get this cliff, they actually had to take probably like millions of photos and then stitch all those photos together to make a big 3D object of this. And what's cool about this stuff is it's been used in like big blockbuster stuff that we see today, like Jumanji and the Jungle Book, and even games like Call of Duty and things of that nature. So I'm going to go back to Quixel.com because the platform that we want to download here is called Bridge. So if I click on this, basically Bridge is just like File Explorer, but it's taking all the assets that we were just looking at and putting them in one place. And what's cool about Bridge is once we download like an asset that we want to use, it's a one-click solution to send it over to Unreal Engine. So we don't have to do like any texturing or anything of that nature. We click one button, it sends it to Unreal, and then we're just good to go. So it's almost like playing with Legos at that point. And if I click on download here, and then from there, you're just going to install Bridge and then you'll be good to go. So once you have Bridge and everything downloaded, the next thing we want to do is go over to the NASA website to get the HDR file that we need to start building from. So I'm going to click on here. I have my tab already set up, but I'll leave this link down below so you don't have to search for it. But this is on the NASA's website and they have a whole bunch of 360 images here that the Mars rover actually took. And the latest one that we have here, if I click on it, you can see that this is actually 1.8 billion pixels in this panoramic shot. And so what they did was they made this free to the public. You know, it's 100% fair use, so we could use it for anything that we want. And I actually had a friend that took this and made this into like a 360 VR photo here, which if you go to his YouTube channel, I also link this down below as well. But his YouTube channel is Creator Up. His name is Hugh, and he put this up on his YouTube channel. And you can actually circle around Mars here. And if you have a VR headset, you can actually see it in VR as well, which was really cool. But what I did was I asked you, I said, hey, I saw what you did. Can you shoot me over that photo so I could start messing around with it in Unreal? And he said, no problem. Because if you go to the NASA website, you can see that it doesn't have any sky or anything in here. So what he did was he created his own sky here so that everything was complete. So if I go back here, this is all alpha channel up here and it's not complete. So I mean, you could put your own sky in there, but I thought what he did was really cool here. And so he shot me over a couple of files. And if I go to my file explorer, I can see this is the one that he originally sent me, which this is pretty cool. But if we're going to make an environment that we're going to be walking around, we don't want to be walking on top of the Mars rover here. So I asked him if he could paint this out, in which he said, no problem again. And so he sent me this one over here, which has the Mars rover painted out, which is cool because now we can start using this to construct our scene. But Unreal won't take a JPEG like this for an HDR the way that we need it. And so what I did was I took it into After Effects, did a little bit more cleanup, and I made this file here, which I'll make available to you guys in the link down below so that you guys can follow along as well. So don't worry about stitching this stuff together or doing any cleanup. I'm going to give you this file and you'll be good to go. So once you have everything that you need here, download this file here so you can follow along. The next step from here is we're going to open up Unreal Engine and get everything started up in there. So once you have everything installed from Unreal, this is the scene that's going to come up here. And so from here, you'll see a couple of things like feature content. Basically, this is just a browser to show you the latest and greatest stuff that they have here. But where we want to go is up to library. And if you don't have any engines here, you want to click on engine versions, click the plus sign, and then it's probably going to give you this version here, 4.25.1, which is the latest version. I'm going to delete this because I already have it installed. And depending on your internet speed, this can take a little bit to download. So I do recommend doing this ahead of time. But once you're ready, you'll just click the launch button here, and then it's going to open up Unreal Engine for you. So once everything's ready, we're going to have a tab here called Project Browser. These are some previous projects that I've been working on. But what we want to focus on is down here where it says New Project Categories. We have a couple of different categories, like one for games, one for television, one for ArchViz, and then one for automotive design. Usually I do this one here since I do work in television, but for this example, I want to show you guys that we can actually interact with our environment and kind of run around it and everything. So I'm going to click on this one called Games, click Next. And once we click Next, it's going to give us a template here, which we have a few options. So this is for people that really want to make games and interactive experiences. We have like a template here for first person. So if you want to make a first person shooter, it's already set up for keyboard or mouse, or if you have an Xbox controller, you could use that as well. But the example I want to use is over here. It's called third person. Yeah, so I'm going to click on this one here because I just want to show a character running around the scene. So I'm going to click on Next. And then we have a couple of settings here, which I usually leave at default. And then down here is where you name your project. Like right here is where you're going to have your location folder. Click on the three dots here, pick where you want to have it. And then over here, I'm just going to name this Mars_UCLA. One note is Unreal doesn't like spaces. Like if I click space, you see it gives us an error here. So I usually do underscores whenever I want to make like a space or anything of that nature. But I'm going to click create project here. So whenever we open up Unreal Engine, this is the default platform that it's going to give us to start. Down here in the lower right hand corner, we're going to hit dismiss where it says new plugins are available. We don't really need to worry about that right now. And then down here below that, it says project file is out of date. It always says that for some reason. I just click update. There we go. We're all good to go here. And so to get started, there's going to be a couple of options that I need you to select first before we get going. So if you come over here to settings, come down to plugins, and then over here where it says built-in, I need you to click on this, and then in the search bar, I'm going to type in HDR, and that's going to bring up this platform here called HDR Backdrop. I want to enable this because this is how we're going to be able to bring that NASA HDR file into our scene. And then down here, you're going to see it's going to say restart. So click on restart now, and it's just going to restart Unreal. It doesn't really take that long. Boom. All right, so everything's restarted. I can close the plugin window. And then right here, this is the default scene that always comes up. It's our template. So if you kind of just wanted to play around a little bit to see how stuff works, just click the play button right here. And I'm going to be using my keyboard and mouse. So if you're used to playing video games, the way that you control this character is W goes forward, S goes backwards, A left, and D right. And so I could kind of just move around here. Then I use my mouse to turn the screen like so, and then spacebar would jump. So right off the bat, you can see we don't even have to do any type of programming or anything to get started here, which is really cool. Then once you're done playing around, just hit the escape key, and there we go. We're back to normal. So I'm scrolling out with the mouse wheel, and then if I hold down the mouse wheel, I can kind of move around my scene like so. But what we're going to do from here is we're going to start a blank screen and we're going to start from scratch. So I'm going to come down here to where it says content browser. I'm going to click content, and then I'm going to right click in here and make a new level. So I right clicked, go right here where it says level, and then it's going to come down here and say new world. I'm just going to name this Mars underscore UCLA. And then I'm going to double click on it. It's going to come up with a window saying save content. I'm just going to click save selected. And then it gives us a blank screen here. And so from here, we can start adding the components that we need to build out our scene. So over here in the top left where it says place actors, I'm going to type in HDR. And that's going to give us the HDR backdrop that we had enabled earlier. So I'm going to click and drag this into my scene. And you can see it gives us a default HDR to kind of work with. So if I come over here, let me pull this up where it says details. And this is where we can control everything like our location, rotation, and scaling. So what I like to do is from my X, Y, and Z here, I like to zero everything out. So I hit 0, then I hit tab, hit 0 again, hit tab, and then hit 0, and then click enter. And that's going to center everything up. So if I hold down the Alt key and then hold down the middle mouse, I'm moving around my scene a lot faster and a lot easier. And then if I scroll, I can scroll backwards a little bit. And then from here, I kind of want to replace this background with our Mars environment, the one that you downloaded earlier. So I'm going to go over to my file explorer. I'm going to look for this file right here. This is Mars without rover underscore WINBUSH. Click and drag this in here. And then it should take a second for it to commute over. Okay, and now it's inside of our scene. So what I want to do is make sure I have my HDR backdrop right here selected. Then I'm going to click and drag the file that I just brought in here over here into this box that just highlighted green. Just let that go. And now we have our Mars scene in here, but it looks all blurry. And so we have to fix our HDR that we brought in. We need to tell it that it's high resolution and then not blur it so much. So I'm going to double click on that image down here that we brought in, Mars without rover underscore WINBUSH. Double click on that. And that's going to bring this window up here. So there's a few things that we need to do here. And so I'm going to extend this a little bit. It looks like we need to update our project again. So I'm going to just click update. There we go. So we should be good. So down here where it says level of detail, I'm going to click on this one that says MipGen settings. Click here. And then I want to come down to one that says no mipmaps and click on that. And sometimes it's going to take a second just for it to calculate. But once it does, you can see that automatically our picture is already a lot clearer than it was. And if I look back in my viewport, it looks a lot more clear, but it's still not clear as it should be. And that's because if I come over here and look, it's telling us that our image is only 512 by 512, which is a really low resolution. So there's a way around that we can fix it to tell it that it's a higher resolution than what it is. So the file that we brought in is pretty large. Like right here where it says imported, this is the file size that we imported is really large. So that means we could go a lot higher, especially higher than 512. And so I'm going to bring it in at 8K, which is 8192. And I'm going to click enter. And depending on how fast your computer is, this is going to take a couple of seconds to calculate. But once it does, you'll see over here in the viewport, it's going to be a lot clearer. Okay, and I can see already on the left-hand side, it's a lot more clear over here. So I'm going to come up, click the save button here. Then I'm going to exit this out. And now you can see that we have a really clean landscape here of our Mars scene. And since this is a photo, like we can't get too crazy with it, but I mean, we can move around in a decent amount of space and not have our image distort, but you can't go all the way to the edges because this isn't really a fully built scene. And since this is an image, what we could do is we could start bringing in like our 3D objects over from megascans in here to start really dressing this up so we can make it look a lot cooler than what it really is right here. So there's a couple more things I want to do first though. Like on my intensity here, I'm going to bring it down a tad bit, maybe like 0.8. And your intensity is how much light's being illuminated by our HDR file. So you notice when I brought it down to 0.8, it got a lot dimmer here. And then underneath here for size, I'm going to make this about 500. And this is just going to make our width a lot larger in our scene. So we have a little bit more real estate to run around in. And then on our projection center, I'm going to click on this right here, this arrow. And then where it says Z, I'm going to take this up to like 200. And there we go. Our scene should be good to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start bringing in stuff from megascans. But first, let me come over here. I'm going to click X over here in my place actors, and I'm going to come down to basic, and then where it says player start, I'm going to click and drag this in here. And then I want to make this absolute 0 for my location as well. And what this does is basically whenever I click the play button here, this is where our character is going to spawn from. But if I do it now, let me click play. You can see our characters falling through the floor. So if I double click back here in my world outliner where it says player start, that brings us back to the center here. And to make it so that our character is not going to fall through the floor, we can actually just bring a plane into our scene. So let me do this again. If I come over here where it says place actors, basics, come down to plane, I'm just going to click and drag that into my scene. And then in my transform here, in my location, I'm going to 0 everything out. And then you can see it starting to spaz out here. We'll fix that in a minute. For my scale, I'm going to make this 500 by 500. Then clips the entire real estate. And then for my Z location, I'm just going to bring it down to like -1. And so now if I click play, our character is on the surface and we can actually start running around here, which is really cool. And now let's start just bringing stuff in from megascans to really dress this up. But first, let me see a landscape that I kind of want to focus on first. Like I like that hill right there. So I'll probably start building right here, start adding some cliffs and some rocks and everything, and kind of have this off into the distance. So if I come down and open up bridge, this is Quixel bridge. And so this is basically the program that will give us access to all the different files that we need. So if I scroll down here, you can see that we have a bunch of different textures. We have a bunch of different 3D objects, and it's all at our disposal. So we can use this all 100% free. You don't have to pay for this at all, which is really cool. So I have a couple of things saved out already. I'm going to click on favorites. And these are some of the assets that I'm going to be using. So if you want to follow along, I would just type in limestone rocks, limestone rubble, and then limestone rocks again. So let me actually type it in up here so we can see. So when I type in limestone rocks, we're going to click on 3D assets. And then we could just scroll down and kind of see all the different things that we have access to. So if you guys want to use actually something different, you guys are welcome to do that. I mean, I have a whole bunch of different options in here. And so let me go back to my favorites, because this one right here is actually called small rock. And what this is basically we could bring these in and we could start painting our scenes with them. But first, let's start bringing in our larger assets, and then I'll show you guys how to use this as well. So I'm going to click on, let's do this one first, this limestone rock one here. So what we're going to do is come over here. First, you'll need to download it. So let me actually show you how you download stuff here. So if I come over, just come over like 3D assets, click on assembly, and then let me look for one I didn't download. So here we go. So I didn't download this one right here. So you see this little green arrow here, you would just click on this and then you'll see it start spinning. Then you should see a percentage here, and that shows you that everything is downloading. And then once it's done downloading, then you'll have a blue arrow, and then you can export from here. So I'm going to go back to the one that I was going to export. Click on limestone rocks. I'm going to come over to export settings. And what I'm going to do is right here for texture resolution, sometimes you have 8K, sometimes it's only 4 and 2. I usually just work with 4K. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to leave everything else at default, just JPEG, mesh format at FBX. And then for mesh LOD, we want to use LOD 0. We can use a high polygon one, but that might be too large. And so LOD 0 is a good one to get a lot of good information in there and have it still look photoreal. And then down here, I already have it installed, but where it says export to, when you click on Unreal Engine, it's going to ask you to download it. And so you'll click on the download button, will automatically install for you, and then you should be good to go. You just tell it version 4.25, and then that's all you really need from there. Oh yeah, installation folder, you want to make sure that you have it installed in here. So depending on where you installed Unreal, you want to go over to Engine and then Plugins. And then once you have that installed, you should be good to go. And once you have everything set up, you just click export. And then you'll see in the top right, it will say exporting to Unreal Engine. And once it's done, it will tell you it's successful. So let me close this down. And once it's done importing into Unreal, we should see the folder change down here in the content browser. So I'm going to close this message log out. And down here, you can see we have a 3D object in which if I click and drag it into my scene, there we go. So it's just like Legos. We just click and drag it in our scene and we can start building from here. So if I look up here in my top right, you can see this right here where it says select and scale. I'm going to click on that. And then if I click over my object that I just dragged in, if I left click and drag, I'm going to drag it over to the left. It's actually making it larger. And if I drag over to the right, it's making it smaller. So I'm just going to click and drag. Then I'm going to click back up here where it says select and translate. I'm just going to move around my scene here a little bit and start moving this rock in the places that I want it to be. So I actually probably make this a lot larger. And if you don't want to scale it with this, you can always scale it over here where it says transform. So let's actually see what it looks like at 6x6. You could probably even go larger, maybe 8x8, make it really massive, something along that line. Then move this around here. And let's say I wanted to blend in with my scene a little bit more. You can see these rocks are a little bit more tan than this one here. So if I come down here to my lower left hand corner where it says limestone rocks, underlined green here, I'm gonna double click on that. And that brings us up to our material manager. So if I come over here where it says albedo, this is where we can control our color. So I just want to make sure that I check mark this one on albedo tint, and then check mark down below it where it says tint intensity. And let me actually make this a little bit smaller so I can see my viewport. Because what I want to do from here is where it's white, this is where we can actually pick the color. So I'm going to click on this and it's going to bring up this color picker, which if you use Photoshop or anything of that nature, this should look familiar to you. So right here where you see an eyedropper, I'm going to click on this and then I'm going to click on my scene to a color rock that I kind of want to use. So somewhere around here might be good. So I'm going to click on that, click OK. And then right here, I'm going to start moving this up. And it looks like it might be making a little bit too tan here. So let me move it over to, so I'm just going to play around with this until I find something that I like there. And then I'm going to blend it in a little bit better with the lighting. So I'm going to come over to lights, come over to directional light and drop this in my scene. I'm going to close this out. Click on my transformer here. I'm just going to zero out my location for my light. Then rotation, I'm going to zero it out as well. So we can use some lighting in here as well to kind of flesh out our scene. So right now we're at, let's say on our Y, let's start moving this over. So you can see as I'm rotating my Y, my sun is moving and it's affecting my 3D object there. So I kind of just want to mess with the X, Y, and Z here. Actually the Y and Z, until I get something that I think looks pretty good and it's going to blend in with my scene pretty well. So maybe something like that. And then as we start playing around with our scene more, we can start blending it in a little bit better. I'm going to click on this, drag it down a little bit more. And then we can actually duplicate this as well. Actually, before we do that, you can see right here where it says lighting needs to be rebuilt. I'm actually going to work with all dynamic lighting. So I'm going to click on my light up here, right here where it says movable. Click this and that gets rid of that. And now my lighting's all dynamic, so I don't have to worry about any errors or anything up there. So now I want to click on my object. I'm actually going to hold down the Alt key, click and drag. And now it made a duplicate of this rock in which I could just kind of rotate it and start playing around with it like this. And so you can see how fast we're starting to build our scene out. So I'm just going to click and drag these rocks out. Maybe drag this down, rotate it a little bit. Something like that. And so that we don't start getting really repetitive, let's start bringing in some other assets as well. So I'm going to go back to bridge. Let's say we want to bring in this one to be like our foreground rocks. So I'm going to click on export here and drag and drop these in. Then I'm going to actually make these a little bit larger as well. So you can see what we're doing here. We're just kind of set designing our scene, just like pulling it down to blend in a little bit with our scene there. Something like so. So I'm just going to set design this little piece here. So I built out my scene. I just kept adding a whole bunch of 3D assets until I found something I liked. And this is what I came up with here. And so I moved my lighting around a little bit and I got the shadows kind of interacting the way that I liked it, but I still think it's a little bit too bright. So I have my directional light selected right now. I'm going to come down to intensity. I'm going to bring down my lux to maybe like 7. Maybe let's try 5. Oops, let's try 5. Somewhere around there, I think it's looking pretty good. I might even be able to do 4. Let me see. Yeah, so something like that's looking pretty cool. So remember those little rocks I was talking about? Let me go back to bridge. And right here where it says small rock, I'm gonna click on this. And what we could do with these assets are, we could actually start painting these around our scene that just really blend it in and make it feel realistic. So I'm gonna click on export here. And this is gonna export a whole bunch of little tiny rocks. And we actually have like a paintbrush in Unreal that you kind of just go in and you just start painting on the surface. It's really cool. So let me make this smaller. Actually, there we go. We're all set to go. And so now to activate this, what we need to do is come up to modes, come down to foliage, and then we can actually click and drag this rock into our foliage here. Then we want to make sure it's selected. And when I come over to my scene, you can see we have like a big sphere. And this is where it's actually going to start painting all of our rocks. But before we do that, let me come over to the settings here. And I'm going to make the scaling maybe a little bit bigger. So let's say like 3, min size 3, max size 4. And this is just going to give us a little bit of variation on the rocks. Some of them will be 3, some of them will be size 4. Then let me come down a little bit. For my offset, I'm going to probably do -3 and max -1. And that's so that we can have it go below the surface a little bit. We don't want it floating on top. So what negative does is it's going to go on our Z axis, which is pointing straight up and down, and it's going to put it in the negative direction. And then where we want to go next is random pitch angle. I'm just going to move this up a little bit. So this is just going to rotate the rocks at random angles. So when we're painting them on, they're not all going in the same direction. It doesn't look like a pattern. Then over here where it says size, this is the size of our paintbrush. So I like to start smaller. So maybe like 125. And actually, before we start painting, let's come over. I want to make this a little bit bigger. So let's say min 4, max 6. All right. And so my size is at 125. I'm just going to start clicking and painting. And you can see that we have rocks appearing in our scene here. And these are a little bit larger. We can make them smaller if we want. But this kind of shows you how the paintbrush works. So now we're just kind of painting in some rocks on our surface here and kind of just blend in our scene. And if we want to have smaller pebbles in here, we just come over here where the scale is. So let's say maybe 1, max size 2. And this way we can start painting in smaller rocks as well. And you can see they're kind of spread out here. So let me hit Control Z. We can make our density a little bit smaller by coming over here where it says density. Let's maybe do 300, see what happens there. So yeah, maybe 500. There we go. So it's giving us a lot more density, which means there's a lot more clumps going on. We can also change the density up here as well. So if I click on one up there, there we go. Something like that is looking pretty cool. So from here, it's pretty much just lining up your camera how you want it, and then you're good to go. Let's actually come over to modes, come down to select. Let's click on play. We could kind of walk around our scene here as well. So this is the clump that we made for our scene. So say that we wanted to shoot our character in here. We could kind of just line up the camera, and this shot's looking pretty cool. So I know it's a little bit exaggerated, but I kind of just wanted to show you guys how you could take stuff from NASA, kind of throw like different set pieces in there and build your own landscapes. So if you want to start making like little scenes out of this and animating it, you're all good to go. So hopefully this helped you guys out. I know there's a lot to digest there, so hopefully you guys come to my talk on July 9th. If you can't make my talk and ask me live, you can always leave me a comment down below, or if you want to ask me anything ahead of time, you can always hit me up on social media as well, or I do have a Discord channel where I'm usually at all day. So if you do have a question, make sure to hit me up on those different avenues. And until next time, I'll see you guys on July 9th. I can't wait to meet you. Take care.